Let me share this real quick. One second. Hello, Jacksonites, and yes, you read the title right. Welcome to the 85th anniversary edition of my review for the 1933 pre-code era monster film, what many people consider to be one of the greatest movies ever made, and what some people, I would not be surprised, consider to be the greatest monster movie ever made, King Kong from 1933. And also, I'll be reviewing its sequel, Son of Kong, because if RKO Pictures can release these movies in the same year, I can release my reviews of these movies in the same video. So yes, I have finally decided to review King Kong films because, well, for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not gonna lie, yes, I was heavily inspired by, actually, hang on a second, let me check my quality of my stream. One second. How can I tell who's watching? Oh, yes. Hello, Big Jack Films. Okay. So yes, I have decided to review the King Kong movies for a couple of reasons. I have been inspired by Jack Buchanan to review these movies because he's the biggest King Kong fan that I know, and also I'm doing it as a piece of celebration for a collaboration that I'm doing with Jack Buchanan on a certain something that he is having on his channel, and also because I have to put my Hondathon on hiatus because Movie Buff Productions will not be able to join me for BIOS and Frankenstein vs. Baragon for an undisclosed amount of time, and I don't want to go 5, 6, or 7 days without getting a video out, waiting for people's schedules to align with mine. So I'm just going to go off and do my own thing for a little while. So until I can get everyone's schedules worked out with mine to finish my Hondathon, it is postponed and put on hiatus until further notice. So I've decided to do King Kong reviews. And another reason, as I figured, I've got Godzilla done. I've got Gamera done. I haven't quite touched Ultraman, but that's an entirely different task in and of itself. So I figure I may as well get the third of the big three monsters out the way, King Kong, of course. So over the next couple of days, I will be... Over the next couple of days, I will be... reviewing King Kong movies. In this video, I'll be reviewing both, like I said, Son of Kong and the original King Kong, both from 1933. Either tomorrow or the next day, I will be reviewing the 1976 remake of King Kong, and sometime after that, I'll be reviewing King Kong Lives. Much to my dismay, but at the persistent request of Big Jack Film Studios. Thank you, Jack. And after that, I will be reviewing Kong Skull Island. And for the grand finale of my King Kong reviews, again, per request of Before Kong Skull Island, I'll also be reviewing Kong 05, though admittedly that review is going to be kind of tough for me to do because I love that movie so much. Then after that, I'll do Kong Skull Island. And for the grand finale of my King Kong reviews, I will be, again, per request of Big Jack Films, I will finally be able to sit down, watch, and review the Big Jack Film Studios King Kong 2016 remake. God help me. Again, I'll stress this again and again and again. Per request. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, per his request, I will be reviewing his movie for the grand finale of this. So, with all that out of the way, let's get into the plots of King Kong and Son of Kong. Of course, I'll be touching on King Kong first, and I'm not going to go as in depth with my plot synopses of these movies. Mainly because when you get right down to it, the plots for these movies, they are fairly simple. And I don't want to drag this out into an 1.5 hour long video because... No, I will not be touching King Kong Movie Buff Productions. I don't want to get my hands ripped off. Anyway, so yeah, the plots to both of these movies are fairly simple. I don't want this to be a really long video, so I'll give brief synopses of the plots for each film, especially with Son of Kong, because you can fill out a sentence and a half with dialogue for the plot of that movie. So let's get into it. So the movie begins with Carl Denham, played by the glorious Robert Armstrong, who is famous in New York City for filming wildlife films in remote and exotic locations. Hires Captain Engelhorn's ship, Captain Engelhorn being played by Frank, is it Reacher or Reicher? Or Riker? And also he hires Captain Engelhorn's ship, the Venture, for a new project that Carl is working on. He is, at the moment, however, kind of stuck because he's been unable to secure an actress for the lead female role in his new film, and he is reluctant to start his thing without getting an actress. So he decides to scour the streets of New York and finds a struggling actress who is about to have the cops call on her for stealing an apple, Ann Darrow, played by Fay Wray. And Carl promises her a life of the adventure of a lifetime, as he puts it. The crew boards the Venture, and they set off to an undisclosed location so far, during which Jack Driscoll, who I think is the first mate of the Venture, played by Bruce Cabot, in a very forced and plot-contrived way, falls in love with Anne in a very bland and boring way. So Denham reveals to his crew later on that the destination that they are heading towards is known as Skull Island, which is an uncharted island out in either the Atlantic or the Pacific. He alludes to a creature dwelling on the island named Kong, which is apparently a superstition amongst people around that island. The crew arrives to Skull Island after, I'd say it's at least 3 or 4 weeks, maybe. And they anchor offshore. Coming aboard, Denham brings along almost half the crew, along with the captain, ashore, and they infiltrate what appears to be an abandoned village, but turns out it's not. It's occupied by natives, who apparently, little behind-the-scenes trivia, many of these natives who are perceived as being black, many of them actually were not black. They were just painted black, which is reused in King Kong vs. Godzilla. And that type of thing would not fly nowadays. So, once encountering the native village, Denham and his group are quickly spotted by the natives of this village, and they interrupt a ceremony of what appears to be the natives preparing a sacrifice in which they term the Bride of Kong. The native chief stops the ceremony, and he approaches this group of people from the ship, and Captain Englehorn engages in conversation because he somehow knows the language of these natives, which apparently is actually just a fake language that was made up for this film. However, when he sees Anne, he offers to trade 6 of his own women for what is known as the Golden Woman, who is Anne. They politely refuse, and they turn around and head back towards the ship. But that night, the natives infiltrate the ship and kidnap Anne, and take her to the altar where she is offered to Kong, an enormous gorilla-like ape standing at 25 feet tall. Kong carries Anne to the wilderness as Denham, Driscoll, and other ship members arrive. They enter the jungle to try to track her down and rescue her. They're ambushed by a Stegosaurus, which they manage to defeat by knocking it out with 2 gas bombs, and then finally putting 2 bullets in its head. And they kill it. They then head deeper into the woods. They come across a swamp. They quickly put together a raft in order to get across the swamp. However, they encounter a Brontosaurus, which swims about amongst the swamp, destroys the raft, kills quite a few of the crew members. They start running out and about amongst the jungle. Until they get to a log branch that goes across the chasm, and they also encounter Kong. Hearing the men chasing after him, he puts Anne up in a tree, and he goes out and he picks up the log and shakes the men down into the cavern, with only Jack Driscoll and Carl Denham being the only survivors. 1 man on each side of the chasm. And after Kong does this, a T-Rex attacks Anne, and upon hearing her screams... Sorry, I had to put something away. Upon hearing her screams, Kong returns and engages in a climactic fight with the T-Rex and ends up killing it by breaking its jaw. Kong retrieves Anne and heads deeper into the jungle. Upon arriving to King Kong's cavern, Anne is attacked by an Elasmosaurus, which Kong again kills. And while Kong is distracted while fighting a Pteranodon after a very creepy scene where Kong removes some of Anne's clothing, Driscoll catches up with Anne, and they rappel down a vine, down the face of a cliff, and they fall into a river below, with Kong chasing after them, quickly following. They run back through the jungle and back to the village, where Denham, Englehorn, and more of the surviving crew members are awaiting them, and Kong breaks open the gate when the villagers try to keep him out, but he breaks open and he rampages throughout the village, killing many of the natives and a couple more of the crew members. And on shore, Denham, who wants to bring back King Kong alive to the States, knocks him out with a gas bomb, and ties him to a raft and takes him back to New York. Kong is presented to a Broadway theater audience as Kong, the Eighth Wonder of the World. Anne and Jack are brought on stage to join him, but they are then surrounded by a group of photographers, and the bright flashes from their cameras causes Kong to freak out, and he breaks free of his chain shackles and goes on another rampage trying to pick Anne up again. He kills a few people. He causes a lot of property damage. He wrecks a crowded elevated train. And then once he catches Anne once again, he climbs the Empire State Building, and where he is then proceeded to be attacked by 4 airplanes. He destroys one, but he eventually does succumb to their machine gun fire. And he ensures Anne's safety before falling down to his doom. Denham arrives and pushes through the crowd surrounding Kong's corpse. And when a policeman remarks that the airplanes got him, Carl Denham looks at him and says, "Nah, it wasn't the airplanes. It was Beauty who killed the beast," thus ending the first King Kong. It is a rather simple plot when you get down to it. In my opinion, it's a lot better in King Kong 05. Not to say that the plot here is bad. I actually just think that... Okay, let me get to my history. It wasn't TNA that killed the beast. Really, Jack? Really? So let me get to my history with King Kong. I was always aware of King Kong's existence, even when I was a Godzilla fan. But the first King Kong movie that I ever saw was the 1976 remake when I was 12 years old. I was 12 years old before I saw my first Kong film. I had seen clips of various King Kong movies on TV. Like one example, they used to play clips on this all the time, was Animal Planet's The Most Extreme. They used to play little snippets of King Kong, the 33 version, on TV all the time, especially on Animal Planet's The Most Extreme. But I didn't see this original 33 version until I was 16. Actually, no, wait. My first King Kong movie was the 05 version because I saw that in theaters opening day. But not long after that was when I saw the 76 version, and then finally when I was 16, I got my hands on... Actually, no, I was 15. Yeah, I was 15, and I got my hands on a DVD from my local flea market, and brought that home, and I watched it. I gave it away. Then I bought the double pack that has both King Kong and Son of Kong from Amazon. And I actually bought it only for Son of Kong at the time because I was really interested in seeing that. More on that later. So then I rewatched King Kong then when I was 16, and the rest is history. I'm not going to lie. I am going to come out and say it before I'll explain my reasoning why when I get to Kong 05. I actually prefer Kong 05 over this movie, in my opinion. This movie, to me, feels very, very, very prototypey, in my opinion. We all know that the original Godzilla was one big experiment piece in and of itself. And it was. It certainly was. But this movie, very much so as well, is also a big experiment piece. And anybody who tries to argue that is a fool, in my opinion. This movie is very prototypey. This movie has it is a bit of a rough film. However, for it being such a prototypical film and for it being such a big experiment piece, what they have accomplished with this movie is very impressive and it is very admirable. I just have to admit, I prefer the 05 remake over this any day. So let's get to the pros and cons of King Kong 33, shall we? The pros, pro number one is the special effects are absolutely outstanding. The jungle sets are very well detailed. They're very well constructed. It definitely looks like dense, unexplored, alien almost foliage. You stare into it and you almost get lost wondering, how long has this jungle been around? How old is this jungle? What the hell lives on this island? How big is this island? All these questions form in your head, even just staring into the background of the island. This movie created a lot of new filming techniques, they master composite shots, having multiple special effects shot in one scene, overlapping live action human footage with stop motion special effects footage in one. There's a lot of special effects things that were created, including well, it wasn't exactly created, I wouldn't say, in this movie, but it was definitely brought to the mainstream attention. And if you want to learn more about it, I definitely do recommend you track down the double DVD release of the original 33 Kong, because on the second disc, there's a 7-part documentary about the making of the original King Kong, and it's full of information, very informative, tons of trivia. If you want to learn more about filmmaking, I definitely do recommend you track down that documentary. It's very informative. The stop motion special effects used for the dinosaurs and King Kong himself Still, well, actually, no. I wouldn't say they quite hold up nowadays because I definitely do feel that they are somewhat clunky. However, like I said earlier, for what this film accomplished and for what this film does, the effects, the stop motion effects for this film are very, very good. The animals move in a somewhat fluid manner, so they don't look like they're just almost like rotoscoped animation or some shit like that. It doesn't look like the stop motion was rushed. It doesn't look like it was haphazardly put together. It actually looks like Willis O'Brien, the man who brought King Kong to life, he was like the prototype Ray Harryhausen, actually took his time and he put his blood, sweat, and tears into making these animals come to life. I still will admit there are some moments where the stop motion is a little choppy, but that's mainly for the dinosaurs, especially the Stegosaurus, in my opinion. But the definite two best stop motion examples in this movie is Kong himself, especially Kong himself, and the T-Rex, which does make sense because those two are the most physically involved stop motion special effects in this film. Overall, the special effects in this film are absolutely outstanding, and I think in definitely their own way, they do far surpass the the significance of the special effects for the original Gojira. That may sound like blasphemy to some people, but it was an entirely different time period than the original Gojira. And yes, the rear screen and miniature projection used in this movie is also very well done. But like I said, go watch the documentary about the making of Kong to learn more about that. But I still do think that the original Gojira is much more important, quote unquote, to the world of special effects because it created Suitmation, and which Suitmation is my favorite form of special effects. Suitimation in miniatures mixed with CGI effects. That's my favorite style of special effects. That's why I'm still a Godzilla fan. That's also why I'm a gigantic Ultraman fan. But still, overall, the special effects really are outstanding. Nah, not really. There's not really much for me to say about Merian C. Cooper. Okay, this movie was it directed by Merian C. Cooper? Okay. The original King Kong was co-directed and co-produced by Merian C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack. Merian C. Cooper himself has been described as like the real-life Indiana Jones. He went on multiple safaris throughout his life, doing exploration stuff throughout Africa and throughout remote areas of the world. And both Merian C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack, they did fight in both world wars, so thank you for your service to our country, even though they're dead, but you know what I mean. He was the one who really held the reign. Like, he is... Okay, Merian C. Cooper is to King Kong what Tomoyuki Tanaka is to Godzilla. The music score done by Max Steiner for this movie is really good. It's definitely a very big and brass and bombastic, absolutely in-your-face score that perfectly... Like, it's perfectly in tune with almost every single action throughout this film. It's very influential. It's very fun to listen to. It just really... like, if this movie did not have the score, I don't think it would be as groundbreaking as it is. I'll go this way, too, to parallel Godzilla once again. Max Steiner is to King Kong what Akira Ifukube is to Godzilla. Overall, the music is really, really good. The monster action in this movie, even though I actually do think there's not enough of it. And also, yes, not to mention Murray Spivak, who did the sound design. He designed all the roars for the monsters on the island. Kong roaring was the sound of a of a lion and a tiger roar done backwards and slowed down slightly. And while I'm not a fan of the Kong roar for this film, it definitely does fit this design. It sounds very, very animalistic and not of this earth, which is good. But yeah, the monster action, like I said, I don't think there's enough of it in this movie. What we have is still really good. The highlight of the film, for me at least, is is Kong's fight with the T-Rex. And something that I did not know until a certain somebody told me is that Willis O'Brien, he actually was a boxer earlier in his life. I think it was either before or maybe during he got into special effects. He was a boxer and a professional wrestler, so he incorporated a lot of boxing techniques into the way Kong fights. You see a lot of curve and uppercut punches in Kong's fighting style, which is, I'm not going to lie, that's really cool. And there's also a couple judo moves / wrestling moves incorporated into Kong's fighting style. Especially when, my favorite part of the fight is when Kong full on tosses the T-Rex over his shoulder. Which I'm not going to lie, like I said, is really, really cool. And also, Kong's fight with the Elasmosaurus, it's a little too short and it's a little generic, but I still do think it is cool seeing Kong fight of sort of a variety of opponents is really interesting to see. You see Kong fight a terrestrial creature, which is the T-Rex. You see him fight an aquatic creature, which is the Elasmosaurus, and you see him fight a flying creature, which is the Pteranodon, which is cool. Though I definitely do think his fight with the Pteranodon is the weakest of all his fights. It's really short. In fact, it's really one-sided. Kong pretty much just gets his hands on him, bites him, and tears him to pieces, and that's about it. But the monster action is fun. And the last pro that I have is both Carl Denham and Captain Englehorn, again played by Robert Armstrong and Frank Racher, I think I'll just call them. They're without a doubt the two best characters in the film. And the absolute best is Robert Armstrong as Carl Denham. I think Robert Armstrong is a very underrated actor, in my opinion. He has a crap ton of charisma playing Carl Denham in this movie. He's very charismatic. He has a very go-get-em attitude and get-it-done best you can type attitude. He's always quick to draw out his camera, but he's also quick to draw out a gun. He's also very proactive. It's like he's not an asshole who kind of hesitates when Anne is kidnapped. When Anne gets kidnapped, he's like, okay, drop the cameras, grab a gun. We're going to go get her. Which is really, really cool. It's actually kind of something that I don't particularly care for about Carl Denham in the 2005 remake, but still, I do love Carl Denham in that film, don't get me wrong. And also, I can't remember his name. Frank Reicher as Captain Englehorn, he kind of plays an old soul mentality into his character, which is cool. He definitely does look like an old soul. I'm not saying that like he is old. He just seems like he's very wise for his years. He's very cool-headed. He's very level-headed. He seems like a very, very just good and wise man. And I like that about characters. Like you take one look at a certain character and you just know that if you have them helping you out in a certain situation, you're in good hands. So let's go on to the cons of Kong 33. Really, there's only 3. But these are pretty big problems for me personally. I feel like this movie is somewhat imbalanced, has somewhat imbalanced pacing. Kind of like with War... Actually, no, not as bad as War of the Gargantuas. Don't you mean the Kongs? What are you talking about? Oh, ha ha. Don't you mean the Kongs? No, I don't mean the Kongs. Jesus. Okay, so yeah, I do feel like this movie has imbalanced pacing. All the stuff taking place on the island is really well paced. It's sort of slow when it needs to be, but it's also fast paced when it needs to be, and it's moderately paced when it needs to be. Like between the monster fights, it kind of just goes along and it lets you sinks in, and it lets you allow what you've just seen sink in, which is good. But I feel that everything leading up to the island and everything after the island, okay. The beginning I feel like is too slow, and the ending after they get off the island is way too quickly paced. And also I feel in general, this actually is the case for every single Kong film except Kong Skull Island. When the characters get off the... actually, no, same for King Kong vs. Godzilla, but I just think that movie is terrible pacing regardless. For a lot of other King Kong films, when they get off the island, the movie drastically goes downhill for me. And this is the same case with me here. When the characters get off the island, which granted, something I noticed on this most recent viewing, when they get off the island in this movie, there's only about a half hour of the film left. Which I definitely do think is not really a problem, but it's also not it's not a pro, but it's not a con either. But yeah, so with a lot of other King Kong movies, after the island, the movie massively goes downhill for me because I don't care about anything that doesn't have to do with the island. Same case with this film here. And cons number 2 and 3, they kind of tie into the characters. But I definitely do think, aside from Carl Denham and Captain Englehorn, the rest of the cast is just cannon fodder. Nobody really has a personality whatsoever except for Englehorn and Denham. The only possible exception is Charlie, the Chinese cook, only because honestly he makes me think of like a prototypical Mr. Miyagi. Hang on, my brother is messaging me. Sorry about that. The two biggest problems that I have with this film is Jack Driscoll and Ann Darrow. Jack Driscoll in particular. Ann Darrow, she's the first beauty that tames the beast. But I do not think that she is the best. I actually definitely do say that is, I think, Naomi Watts, I think. Sorry. Actually, I can just do this. Naomi Watts nails Ann Darrow in Congo 5. Fay Wray does not. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Fay Wray does not nail Ann Darrow for me. I'm sorry. I don't think her acting is all that good. A lot of the time, she has this really dazed and confused look on her face whenever she's on screen. A lot of her dialogue, I feel, is very, very cringy. And when she's in custody of Kong, all she does is whimper and scream. And it gets so goddamn aggravating to listen to. It really does drive me absolute up the motherfucking butt the fuck wall. How much you could play a drinking game or a smoking game and you will get fucked up. Take a drink every time and either whimpers or screams in this film and you will get fucked up. Oh, God, Ann Darrow, just in this movie. But the worst character in this movie, without a complete shadow of a doubt, is Jack Driscoll. He is the definition of bland, boring, and uninteresting. His acting is very wooden. It's very one-dimensional. It's very just blasé. Yes, Heath, I noticed I have 90 subs. Hey, the Q&A is coming closer and closer. Yes, Jack Driscoll is the worst character in this movie. I'm so glad he does not appear in Son of Kong. Just Jack Driscoll sucks. Again, he's way better in Son of Kong. Actually, from here on out, the male protagonists, the male human protagonists in every single Kong movie throughout, except King Kong vs. Godzilla, are so much better than Jack Driscoll in this film. So much better. It's just Bruce Cabot, you suck. I don't mean to insult the dead, but you suck. You royally suck. And so with all that said about the original King Kong, I don't really have that much to say about it, because honestly, what the hell else has there been said that hasn't been said already? It's an 85-year-old film. I have to rate this movie on two different scales, objectively and personally. Once again, like with War of the Gargantuas, I have to do that. And also with Godzilla, so another Godzilla parallel. I am not the biggest fan of this movie at all, really. I enjoy it in some areas, and I definitely do respect it, and I admire it, and I am thankful for its existence. But in the general scope of kaiju, like if I was to do an entire rating video of every single kaiju movie that I have seen, God, that would be almost like 100 movies long. The original King Kong would definitely be in the 80s for me. Number 1 being the best and 100 being the least best. King Kong 33 would be in the high 80s for me. And I hate to say that. So objectively, I'm not going to give this movie a perfect 10 because I don't believe that it is a perfect film. Because like I said, the pacing is off and Jack Driscoll sucks balls. So I'm going to give this movie an 8 out of 10 objectively. It's a very well-made movie. There's a lot of effort put into it. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears put into it. It's very influential. It inspired countless people over the years to make their own films. It inspired Peter Jackson to make the 2005 remake. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a touch of it in the Lord of the Rings films as well. And it also did inspire Godzilla. As I've said this before, Ishiro Honda and especially Eiji Tsuburaya were big fans of the original King Kong. And if it wasn't for this film, Godzilla would not be around, and I would not be the guy that I am today. But personally, I'm going to give this movie a 5 out of 10. In the general scope of kaiju films, I like so many more so much better. I'm sorry. I give this a 5 out of 10. I prefer the others more. So, with all that said about King Kong 1933, let's get to the sequel, Son of Kong, also from 1933. Yes, indeed, probably one of the biggest definitions of a quickie sequel, like in existence. Not quite as much as something like, say, Godzilla Raids Again. Well, actually, no, at least Godzilla Raids Again came out the next year. But that doesn't help because Gojira came out in November of 1954, and Raids Again came out, I think it was in May or April of 1955, so that doesn't really help. So yeah, Son of Kong was also released in 1933, excuse me as I put the movies back. And yes, in my 6-movie collection. I have them along with 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later and various other movies and such. So yes, Son of Kong came out in 1933, the same year as the original King Kong, which it was done that way for one reason. Money. Actually, no, it was 2 reasons, sort of, but money and dumb studio executives. So, the original King Kong had a budget of $672,000, which for 1933, that was a lot of money, which is $12 million adjusted for inflation. And the box office of What up with the shades, Heath? And its box office in 1933 was $2.8 million, which again, for 1933, that's a lot of money. $51 million adjusted for inflation. And also in 1952, King Kong was re-released in theaters, and it was a huge success. The box office for that absolutely eclipsed the original 33 release. So it was a very successful film. So Marion C. Cooper went to the executives at RKO, which now apparently today is pretty much just Warner Brothers, and said to the producers, I'd like to make a sequel, because I still got some ideas up here that I want to put down to paper. And the executives at RKO said, okay, sure, we'll let you do a sequel, for a couple exceptions. The film would have half the budget of the original, $269,000, and would be set to be released Christmas season of the same year, December of 1933, December 22nd, 1933. The film was only released 10 months after the original. And it also did not do very well in the box office. It made $616,000, so it only made 3 times its original budget. Not very good. Good job, dumbasses. And there's only one reason why it was set to be released that year. Is because the executives at RKO wanted the first film to be still fresh in people's minds, which I think is stupid. Do you really think your audience is that dumb? And while, yes, I still do think that, I think that the reason that they had that was because, and in 1933, there was no such thing as home video. If you missed a movie in the theater, you missed it. So what I think they should have done is still given the movie either the same budget or maybe $700,000. Just give them a little extra money to do a little extra stuff. Because if they can accomplish what they did for the first film and make it be as successful as it was, if you give the sequel just a little more than the first movie's budget, they could do a lot more and it could be better. And then, to keep the first movie in people's minds, re-release the film. Re-release the film before Son of Kong comes out. That way you wouldn't have that problem. But no, they decided to be stupid about it. So I'm going to get through the plot of Son of Kong very, very quickly, because another sign that this movie is is very rushed. In fact, this movie, I mean, if you look up the actually no, I'd definitely say that's still Atragon, but I believe the word rushed has multiple definitions. And if you were to look it up in the dictionary, there'd be 3 pictures of 3 movies. Shut the fuck up, Restless, you failed abortion. What the fuck? Dude, if you're gonna insult me, then just leave. Don't even watch my shit. Anyway. Where was I? Oh yeah, there should be 3... There's pictures of 3 movies as a definition of rushed. Godzilla Raids Again, Atragon, and Son of Kong. The original King Kong is an hour and... I'm just going back and forth. It's not counting the 4-minute long overture, which is just a screen that says overture for the first out. When did I lag out, Heath? Anyway, so the original King Kong was an hour and 40 minutes for its runtime. Son of Kong is an hour and 9 minutes. 69 minutes. Well, 68, not counting credits, but still. I don't know what I... Apparently there's some guy named Cronus who called me a fatal abortion and calls me restless. Anyway, so yeah, Son of Kong is an hour and 9 minutes long. You could... In the time that it takes me to watch Avatar or the 09 or 05 remake of Kong, I could watch this movie 3 times. So, okay, Son of Kong takes place about a month after the previous film, and it follows Carl Denham, who has been indicted of... He's been indicted in numerous lawsuits following the destruction of Kong. You know, obviously a lot of people are very pissed off that you brought this creature to our city. You let him destroy us. We want you to pay for it. So upon hearing that he's about to be indicted by a grand jury, Carl leaves New York City with Captain Englehorn and the Venture, who is certain that he himself will be similarly served within a matter of time. And they try to make some effort to make money shipping cargo around the Oriental Islands like Singapore and such places like that. However, they're not that successful, and they reach the Dutch port of Da Kang, and Carl is amused to see that there is a show, quote-unquote, being presented, so he and the captain attend it, and it turns out to be a series of performing monkeys, oh the irony, capped by a song called Runaway Blues, sung by Hilda Peterson, played by... Helen Mack, who's actually a much better female protagonist than Ann Darrow, if you ask me. But after... And the show is obviously fallen on bad times. The only 2 people who applaud when the show is over, actually no, 3, but mainly 2, is Carl and Charlie. They were played by the same guy who played him in the first film. But that night, Hilda's father, who runs this show, he stays up getting shit-faced with a Norwegian skipper named Hellstrom, who had lost his ship under questionable circumstances. Hilda's father ends up getting in Hellstrom's face, and he knocks him over the... Hellstrom knocks the father over the head with a whiskey bottle and kills him. Their tents burn down, and Hilda releases all of her animals in the show into the wild. Carl and Englehorn run into Hellstrom, who apparently is also the guy who sold Carl the map to Skull Island, and he convinces the 2 that there is apparently some sort of hidden treasure on the island. Denham and Englehorn agree to go back to retrieve this treasure, and later Denham meets Hilda while she is trying to get her monkeys back, and despite her pleas, Denham refuses to take her with him to leave Da Kang. But shortly after Cronus is my friend. Oh, okay. Oh, I get it, because your name is Restless. Okay, my bad. Never mind. I thought I had a hater in my stream. Never mind. Okay. So after they go out to sea, Hilda is found as a stowaway on board. Hellstrom talks Hilda into being quiet because Hilda knows that Hellstrom killed her father. However, soon after, Hellstrom incites a mutiny on board the Venture when the sailors find out about the 12 people who were killed during the first trip to Kong's Island. And the sailors want no more captains, and throw Denham, Englehorn, Hilda, the cook Charlie, and also Hellstrom overboard, leaving them in a longboat with 2 shotguns, 2 double-barrel shotguns, some food, and some water. And they try to be friendly towards the natives, but the natives blame Carl for the destruction of their village, which does make sense, so they are forced to a different part of the island. There, Denham and Hilda meet and befriend an albino gorilla, apparently named Kiko outside the film, who is apparently the son of Kong, who is over twice the height of a man, around 12 to 14 feet tall. Carl assumes the ape is Kong's son and gives him the name Little Kong. They find Kong trapped, or Little Kong, I'll just call him Kiko. They find Kiko trapped in some quicksand, so they knock over a log and allow Kiko to escape. Denim and Hilda are attacked by a giant cave bear, but Kiko fights it off. And it's actually a pretty fun fight. And Denim bandages Kiko's finger in return. It's very obvious that Kiko is much more docile and much more friendly towards other life. He's much more goofy as well. Soon after this, Charlie, Englehorn, and Hellstrom are attacked by a Styracosaurus, which chases them into a cave. And after a while, this results in one of the shotguns being destroyed by the Styracosaur. So Carl ends up finding some authentic treasure, which turned out to be Hellstrom's idea of bullshitting them just to get his way out of Dekang. But he actually finds real treasure. And after knocking down a wall to get inside a hidden cave where the treasure is located, Kiko gets into a fight with a Nothosaur, a giant Nothosaur, which Kiko kills. And upon seeing Kiko, Hellstrom freaks out and tries to escape in a lifeboat, but is killed by an Elasmosaurus. And right as this happens, as Hilda, Captain Englehorn, and Charlie are running to save the lifeboat, a random-ass earthquake shows up right out of butt-the-fuck nowhere, strikes the island, and it begins to destroy the island. Kiko gets his foot stuck in the top of a mountain on the island, and he sacrifices his life in a very cheap and really stupid fucking fashion to save Carl by holding him above the water until he can be saved. And the film ends with Carl and Hilda throwing their lot in together because he did manage to still retrieve the giant diamond to make all of the surviving ship members wealthy as they are rescued by a passing ship. So how about this plot? Well, Jesus fucking Christ, can you spell rushed, and can you spell lots of missed potential? I am actually actually, no, I'll say that for a minute. I'll say that for a little later. What are the pros of Son of Kong? Well, actually, pretty much the same as the original King Kong, but in a bit of a surprising way. The special effects are not great this time around. I just think they're good. Obviously, because this is a rushed film, a lot of the island sets from the original King Kong are reused in this film, which is fine, I guess. I mean, if the stuff isn't broke, why not use it again? It is the same island, and it is generally the same area that you explored. Actually, no, it isn't, but it is. Same area you explored previously, so hey, why not? So the sets still look good. They're still well constructed. The special effects aren't as extravagant as they were in the last film. There's not as many rear projection shots or double exposure shots or composite shots. And also the stop motion effects seem to be, they look rushed. They're still good, but there's a lot of times where they look a lot more choppy than they did in the first film, which obviously is not good. But they still look decent. I mean, I've actually never really seen a case of bad stop motion effects, to be perfectly honest. I guess you could say this movie is the closest you can say to it being bad. I don't think it's bad, though. I just think it is noticeably rushed, and it is noticeably a downgrade. One thing I believe this movie has over the original is the music score. There are a lot of recycled clips from the first film here, which does make sense because it is a rushed film. But there is also some original stuff in here too, and I just think in general this movie's score is better than the first film. That may sound like blasphemy to some diehard fans of the original Kong, but hey, it's my opinion, man. I think this movie's score is better than the original. I don't have much to say about it, but I do think it is good. It once again does match almost beat for beat the events of the film to a T, which is great. Just like the first film. And just overall, it is a really good score. Pro number 3 is that the monster fights, there's only 2 of them, they are fun. Kiko definitely fights in a very similar way to Kong. However, I think Kiko is much more of a grappler and a wrestler than he is a boxer than Kong, which does make sense. I mean, not doesn't make sense, but which I do like because it allows the two to be completely different characters. Kong is the aggressive power boxer fighter, whereas Kiko is the much more agile, speed-based grappler wrestler, which is cool. The best scene in the film, in my opinion, well, actually, the entire middle, or no. I actually do like the first and second act of this movie. It's just the third act, i.e. the earthquake, that is just completely fucking stupid. Sorry, my brother is messaging me once again. I have to look at that later. Sorry, so the best monster fight to me is Kong versus the cave bear, which I definitely do think that whereas the T-Rex is the best and greatest opponent for King Kong, the cave bear is the best and greatest opponent for Kiko. And their fight is really, really cool. And I actually like that Kong doesn't kill the cave bear. He just simply roughs it up and drives it away with a big stick, which I do like. It shows that Kiko is different from his father, or seemingly his father. But he does kill the Nothosaur, which does make sense, because that thing is much more, in my opinion, a much bigger threat than the cave bear. But, whatever. The monster fights are fun. Though it's a little disappointing that they're kind of short. Actually, they're really short. But still, they are fun. And the best thing about this movie, in my opinion, are the characters. The main 5, at least. Charlie is definitely a bit of the weakest, but that's only because he has the least amount of dialogue and the least amount of screen time. But the best character in this movie is easily Carl Denham. Robert Armstrong's acting has significantly improved from the original King Kong, in my opinion. He's much more... He still has charisma, but he's much more personable. He actually shows remorse and guilt for his actions in the previous film. Whereas there, he was very hyperactive and hyper go-get-em, which is also good. But here, he's much more down-to-earth. He's more personable. He's just a lot better acting-wise in this movie, in my opinion. And the guy who plays Captain Englehorn... he's actually, I would say, pretty much the same, though, again, his dialogue is a lot better, and just his character in general is a lot better in this movie. He has a lot more screen time than he did in the first film. Well, actually, no, I think that's debatable. But he's still good. The guy who plays John Marston as Nils Hellstrom, he does good, too. He's a typical slimy douchebag, but he still does a good job. And also the Helen Mack as Hilda, she does a good job too when she's on the island. When she's at Dakang, her acting is very wooden, in my opinion. She speaks with the same expression on her face and the same monotone voice every single scene she's in. But when she is on the island, she her acting significantly improved. She no longer has the same stoic facial expression and monotone voice. She actually puts emotion into her facial expressions and her voice. She does a good job. In my opinion, is much better than Fay Wray as Ann Darrow. May sound blasphemous to some, but I don't care. And let's get to the cons. In my opinion, this movie has terrible pacing. It's generally, actually no, I would say it's imbalanced, but I'd say it's imbalanced in a different way. It feels both rushed and slow at the same time. This movie is 1 hour and 9 minutes, and you'd think for a film that is that short, you'd think it would be moderately well paced, but like I said, it feels short and quick both at the same time. And it's really jarring, and it's actually kind of frustrating for me, because I see the good things in this movie, and I would love to see a remake of this movie. Like, if they made the sequel trilogy that they planned for the 2005 remake, I would have loved to see that, but no. So I think the first 2 acts are moderately paced, but you still feel like there's slow moments, and then there's also really quick moments. And the last half hour of this movie is insanely fast-paced. Like, you just feel like it's just bam, 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 bam. And everything moves so quickly that you don't really have time to allow all the stuff that you're seeing sink in. It's really distracting. It's really jarring. Con number 2, this movie is really just way too short, in my opinion, like I said. In fact, all of my problems with this movie stem from the fact that this movie is so rushed. Because I think this movie is actually sort of underrated, because I actually found myself enjoying this movie quite a bit upon its most recent rewatching. But this movie is way too short. Actually, I'll just breeze through all the cons. The pacing is bad. It's too short. There's a lot of missed potential in this movie. Like, we could have explored Hilda and Carl's relationship with Kiko a lot more. We could have explored Skull Island a lot more. We could have explored the reaction of the natives a lot more. This movie is just, there's so much missed potential. I feel like this movie is begging for a remake, in my opinion. And also, another big problem that I have is that the ending of this movie sucks. It is a total fucking cop-out. This is why I hate random earthquakes in kaiju movies. Because it's a lazy way out. It is a true lazy way out. And I believe this is where the lazy way out earthquake ending began and was conceived and shit out in a quickie birth. Deformed birth. I hate this movie's ending so fucking much, because why does Kiko have to die? Why does the monster always have to die in American films? Not in always, but 99% of the time the monster dies. Even when you get attached to the character, the monster dies. So I'm not going to drag this out any longer. Son of Kong, I actually feel like had this movie not been rushed, it could have been better than the original. I am not shitting you. I really do think if this movie was given a year to be made and flushed out a lot more... Hang on, my brother is messaging me once again. $60? Holy shit. Anyway, so yeah, had this movie been given a year to not be rushed and actually flushed out a lot more, I do think this movie would have surpassed the original. But no, they decided to rush it. And again, I cannot stress this, I think this movie would seriously benefit from a remake. I'm not going to rate this movie on 2 different scales. I'm just going to combine both. This is not a bad sequel, but it's also a very frustrating one. But I am going to rate this movie a 6 out of 10. I found myself enjoying this movie quite a bit upon its most recent rewatching. In its current state, is it better than the original? In some ways, yes. In many ways, no. But 6 out of 10. Both of these movies I do recommend to hardcore monster movie fans. But mainly the first movie I recommend to hardcore monster movie fans. The Son of Kong, I mainly just think is a curiosity piece. So that'll do it for my reviews of both Son of Kong and the original King Kong from 1933. Look forward to my reviews of the rest of the King Kong movies, 76, King Kong Lives, Kong 05, Kong Skull Island, and Big Jack Films remake. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Share this video with your friends. And as always, go catch a giant fucking ape, kill it, and then save his little son, and then save him from a stupid ass earthquake. And I'll see you in the next one.